Hi, and welcome to my channel, to the Billion Dollar Secret channel. Today we'll have a very special entrepreneur, one of the, in my opinion, greatest visionaries in our world, who is about to change the way our society works. Dr. Titus Gebel is the inventor of the free private cities concept and CEO of Tipolis Corporation. He is a serial entrepreneur with a PhD in law and has founded a number of companies. One of them was the energy and resources group Deutsche Rohstoff AG. And Titus wants to create an entirely new product in the market of living together, which aims to fast-track economic and societal progress. And his new enterprise, Tipolis, focuses on the implementation of Titus' invention, free private cities. Welcome, Titus, to my channel. It's an honor to have you here.
Hello, Rafael. It's a pleasure to be here.
Titus, you are a visionary, for me, one of the movers and shakers of the world, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot about you in the future, and the world will get to know your ideas. But tell us about yourself. What did you do before, especially as an entrepreneur? Deutsche Rohstoff AG, and so on and so on.
Yeah, as you said, I'm a lawyer by education, and that was my initial occupation. I also did a PhD in international law, and then started working as a lawyer the first 5 years. But I found out that this is nothing I really want to do for the rest of my life, just providing services for others. But I wanted to create something. And but at first I have to make some experiences. So I switched to the industry, at that time, biotechnology industry. I became a manager there, and then eventually I switched sides and go to the venture capitalists on the other side of the table, and became aware of how it works, like setting up companies, startup companies, financing startup companies. And through that occupation, I discovered back in 2003 that resources will be a big thing in the mining industry, and everything was totally down at that time. And you could at the same time see that China was growing, right? Just to give you and your listeners some figures. At that time, which is not 20 years even, China has absorbed about 10% of all the metals in the world, right? And today it's 25%. So you have an extreme increase in a very short period of time. And I saw it coming. It wasn't too difficult to see it coming at that time. And I said, okay, this can only be solved by the price, right? And which happened. It was a big super cycle in 2007, and or what people call a super cycle, at least until before the GFC. And then you had gold. And so we had a lot of success with this Deutsche Rohstoff AG, which I eventually founded in an own company in the resources sector, which went public in 2006. I did some co-foundings in the oil and gas sector, and but then I thought, after we were successful, I was 8 years CEO. It was repeating and repeating, and I was also a bit of, I would say, disappointed with politics. I was always engaged as a liberal person, classical liberal person, in German politics for about more than 30 years. But I was finding out that despite I was very well connected to people who eventually became ministers in the government, in federal government, that I would say the state as it is with the parties, the party dictatorship, right? So there's no chance. It's not reformable. And I was then thinking, well, what do I do, right? I mean, can try to convince people that free markets and self-responsibility are good things for the whole society, but I discovered that the majority is not of that opinion and will never be, right? So I mean, then I had to think, hey, what do I do now? And my conclusion was to come up with a completely new product, taking myself out of politics and just offer a product
On a free market. But let's come back one more step to this Deutsche Rohstoff AG, because I would like the people to get to know you as an entrepreneur, because I have heard about the numbers of that company, and they are amazing. I mean, you were building mines around the world. You were mining resources. So what resources you were mining generally?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that easy. I mean, and mining is a tough business, because if you discover something in the ground, right, with drilling and exploration, it normally takes 10 years or longer until this is in production.
And a lot of capital. It's very
yeah, no, because the procedure is taking so long until you can really dig something out. You have to process it. You dig out the rock, right? You process it. Then you have to find somebody who's taking your material, and then you have impurities and all that. Whereas in the oil and gas business, you drill a well, you find all your producer, right? So over time, we found out that the oil and gas business is easier than the mining business. But we started as a mining company, and the first production we had was gold and silver in Australia. We then okay, this was a small mine, not much, I think 15,000 ounces a year or so. But we were then, this was in a time where the gold price was going up all the time, right? It was around, I think 2009, 2010, something like that. So, and we managed to sell the mine for a good price, and then invested in a bigger mine, which was tungsten at that time. Tungsten and molybdenum. Tungsten, it's a small market, so we could be well, responsible for a couple of % of the world market, right, with this mine. But it was not so easy price-wise, and we had also exploration together with Glencore in Canada for zinc, and we had projects for tin in Germany. East Germany, ore mountains were one of the big tin provinces of the world, and over time people heard about us, and one of our strategy was, because when we opened this company in Germany, people from former East Germany came to us and said, hey, we have been responsible geologists for the German Democratic Republic, and we have discovered a lot of good things which are not known to the public, to the world market. Are you interested? And I said, okay, make me a top 10 list of the best deposits you have discovered, which are not known to the world market. And they did, right? And we basically got the licenses for those. And we eventually found partners from Australia for the tin projects, and even a rare earth deposit was found. You know that the German Democratic Republic was at that time the third biggest uranium producer in the world, and they delivered all the uranium for the Soviet Union and the nuclear weapons and that. And in doing so, they drilled the whole country, and by coincidence discovered other things, right? So it's a strange story, but that helped us in the beginning, because the metal prices were skyrocketing, and so everybody was interested in that. When over time we were approached by, for example, former oil and gas people from this time West Germany. Few people know West Germany was the biggest oil producer in the 60s in Europe, right? And they said, we had a lot of good oil fields that were abundant in the 80s, but they had still plenty of oil left, right? And so we did the same with the help of these people. We claimed licenses, and I can tell you this has been a huge success, right? There have even been discoveries of big new oil fields in southern Germany in the Rhine Graben area. Nobody would ever have this on the map, right? But we knew, because people approached us, that there's oil in Germany, and it's conventional oil, right? There's nothing special with it. And this is something where we then eventually got the interest of American oil and gas people. And I found out that these were really, I would say, 2 classes better than anything you find in Europe. That is, if you're in a market where you have 4,000 competitors, where you have all kinds of service providers, and also government authorities who know how to handle oil and gas applications, I think nobody has a chance to cope with the US companies in that regard, right? At least in their own backyard. So we said, hey, you guys know your market better than you know the European market. Why don't we do something together with you in the US? And at that time, it happened that these hydraulic fracturing, which was invented to basically 50 years ago, it's nothing new to what the people call fracking, right? So somehow to discriminate against it. But this is an old technology, but it was used to stimulate old oil and gas fields. And now some small mid-sized companies discovered that you can get gas out of that from very tight rocks, which normally you cannot make it profitable. And they said, hey, if we fracture those rocks with water and put some sand so that it's not immediately closing again the cracks, we can put the gas out of it, because gas is light, right? It's easy to get it out. And that worked, right? And that was already happening. But in my time, people found out, hey, can't we use this for oil as well? Because they're very tight oil rock levels in the ground, where you drill a well, you make your perforation, there's a little bit of oil, but then it's over. And with fracturing, suddenly, hey, a lot of oil is coming and it's pouring into that oil well for quite some years. And then suddenly it was possible that you could drill the mother rock, where everybody knew that there's oil in it, but you couldn't get it out. Now you know you can get it out, and you know it's there, right? Before you had to drill the bubbles that were here and there due to geological formation and shielding, but now it's much easier. You drill the mother rock and you get, the question is only how much can you get out of it. And we were exactly the beginning of this boom. We were in the US with people who were the most experienced and with these technologies. And I mean, was nearly inevitable to be successful, right? And for Deutsche Rohstoff, we started, my partner and I was basically the CEO, and he supported me with finding financing. He was a very experienced financing guy. So we put together, I think, 600,000 euros.
He was a former CEO of one of the German stock markets, right?
No, he was a director, but not a CEO. But he was the one who invented the neue Markt, the new market, back in 1998 or 97, which was a big success. And this was his idea. But he was then a consultant for making IPOs, right? And he the point was, look, how this happened is Raphael, is also a funny story, right? I mean, before I was making Deutsche Rohstoff AG, I was again in the venture capital business, and I was approached by a company who said, hey, or better, we had an investment together after I decided that we should do some resources investments. And these people liked me, and they said, we have a resources company in Canada and Kazakhstan. So it was a German-Canadian family. Don't you want to become CEO and make an IPO? I said, hey, I love to do that, right? They were looking for somebody with a legal background for IPOs. And I then became CEO and was looking for a consultant for an IPO. And then I found Thomas Gutschlag, my former partner, who is now Deutsche Rohstoff CEO. And he helped me for 3 months or 2 months to prepare this IPO. And then the owner said, oh no, we have decided otherwise, we don't want to go public, want to tell the public our secrets, right? And I said, what do I do now? And then my Thomas Gutschlag told me, hey, why don't you do it on your own? And I said, well, if you help me, right? And that was basically the birth of Deutsche Rohstoff AG, because he agreed. And he first became basically chairman and I the CEO, and then he later came on board as a CFO full-time. And in 2006, we started a company. In 2010, we went public at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. When we founded the company in 2006 with 600,000 euro. And I think in the heydays, which will be reached again soon, we had a valuation of about 130 million, which is small compared to the big mining and oil and gas companies. But if you think we have started with 600,000 and became a producer, I mean, we produced 10,000 barrels a day, right? Just a handful of German guys, which came out of nothing. That is a big success in my view.
And you had huge profitability and also like per capita profitability. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because this is amazing. I mean,
and I would say this is only possible since about 10, 20 years, or maybe 10, 15 years. Why is this the case? How can it be that that 5 people can, sorry?
Tell us the numbers, because, you know, people don't know what we are talking about, right? So tell us the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it was possible to get a I mean, it's every year it's a little bit different, one active holding, but we have 12 people, right, and profit of 80-100 million, right? So and that is in the heydays, right? But how is this possible? It's possible because you can source out everything. So it's possible that you have a company in the US which has only 5 people and is producing 10,000 barrels a day. Why? Because you can source out the drilling to a drilling contractor. You can source out the oil collection to a refinery. You can even source out the control of the wells to a third party who is then every day checking if everything is all right. So what you have to do, you need basically an engineer, a geologist, a reservoir engineer, and 2 admin people. And they can start an oil company in the US, not in every country, because it's such a immense service provider density there for everything. And I think this is a trend worldwide, right? You get even more separation of labor, and then you can really, as a single person, can start a production company, which is fantastic. Right?
And I think this is similar in real estate right now. So in real estate development is maybe one small part of your new project, or will be.
It is a bigger part.
This is also something where you can resource a lot, right? So in that respect, it's similar. So coming back, I mean, amazing. You're apparently a serious entrepreneur, big business, real business, heavy business. Tell us maybe before we come to free private cities, maybe for our audience, 3 lessons for you as an entrepreneur that you took from your first experience that you are taking now to your new project that you learned in business. Like
one is you do not put all the eggs in one basket. Even if you are the most intelligent person in the world, so many things can go wrong because there's so many parameters you cannot influence that you should, especially what we are doing now, what we did back then, we didn't have only one resources project. We had several projects and not all of them were successful, right? I could say that some were really successful and very few totally failed. Some we just got some so la la, but this is okay, right? As long as you have 1 or 2 company makers with you. So this what I would repeat, that model that we say we have several projects in one branch in the industry that you're doing.
And then you encapsulate this project, right, in a separate companies. So
yes, exactly.
The unsuccessful ones, they don't somehow destroy the profitable ones.
Yeah, right? This is my project, my concept of what I call an active holding. And maybe this is something some of your listeners might, it doesn't work in all industries, but what I do is starting a company as an active holding. That means we will incubate projects on our own, maybe send own people there, but do it in a project company. So that is shielding this from a if it's a failure, then it's only this company and not the whole holding. And then we have maybe some projects where we just taking a share that are already existing and we are investing or we are helping them. And other projects where we say, hey, we cannot invest here, but we can give you some advice, and then you give us an equity in exchange. And normally it is that we are starting new projects, form subsidiaries, then over time it gets diluted and eventually it gets, because investment is coming in, and then eventually it gets then sold. And so you can make money. So this is, and yeah. Second one is that I would not necessarily go public again with the holding. I would, it's having too many shareholders is also sometimes a little bit difficult because you have a lot of steering. That is 50% of your time is really only used for dealing with stock markets, supervisory board, journalists, requests of your shareholders. We had about 5,000 shareholders or so when we were listed, right? So I would next time, and I am also chairman of another resources holding, which I'm doing in Liechtenstein. We have only 10 shareholders and maybe it will be 15 or 20 at the end, but then we rather go public with the subsidiaries and not with the holding. That is my second lesson. And maybe if you are really good in something, you shouldn't use 50% of your time for something else. That is the second lesson.
Okay. And the third one? Maybe from you know, something like entrepreneurship part or private or whatever.
Yeah, I'm thinking about what else.
If you have just two, it's okay. Okay, so let's now switch to your new project, right? Because new project is about improving or changing the way we live together. And when you were talking about earlier, you told me how huge this market is, and I think most people don't realize how huge this market is. It is about governments, about living together. Can you tell us the numbers? I mean, what?
Yeah. Well, most people don't even think that it's a market, right? But it is. It's government or governance. And why is it a market? Because 30% of the global GDP, if there was such a figure, right, of all countries together, 30% of the global GDP goes through government hands, taxes, subsidies, all that. That makes it the biggest market of all. It's bigger than health, it's bigger than energy, it's bigger than real estate. And that is a market. Why is it a market? Because at the end of the day, you want something from your state, right? You want, first and foremost, protection of life, liberty, and property. And then you have all kinds of other ideas. But this is, and in exchange, you're willing to pay something as a tax or whatever to your state. And that is a service, right? And what I discovered is that people are not thinking about a living together as a market, because they say, well, the state is something different. It's not the market, it's just the opposite of the market. But I say, my thesis is, no, that's not true. It's also a market. And if you're not satisfied with your state, or if you're totally pissed off your state, then you normally leave the country and go in another one where you are more satisfied. Like many people from Germany moving to Switzerland, right, over the years. And that is a normal thing, because they, hey, their taxes are lower there and their security is higher, whatever, you name it, right? Everybody has their own reasons, but this is a market. And it is a market as any other market in principle. Because if you can provide a service in this market that is liked by the people, then you will be successful. But what we have is, we have about 200 countries, and 90% of them are making losses every year, right? 90% of the market participants are making losses. And I have seen polls from the US and from the UK. And there are probably other countries are not so much different, where people were saying 80% of the people were saying, I'm dissatisfied with my government. No matter right or left, no matter what party is in power, people are not satisfied with their government. 80%. So if you have now a market where 90% of the market participants are making losses and 80% of the customers are dissatisfied, there must be a chance for an entrepreneur, right?
Great potential, apparently, right? But look, I mean, until now, like, most people have this idea in their heads that the gold standard for countries, right, is like democracy. And you know, there were so many wars, at least justified with exporting the democracy to other countries, bringing freedom and you know, and better governance, whatever. So why do you think you could be successful with a product against seemingly perfect solution, right?
Yeah, for the reason why that people are dissatisfied, right? And especially democracy is, I mean, North Korea considers themselves a democracy. China says we are a democracy, right? Now you have in Western countries the situation that you can vote every 4 years in most countries, right? Every 4 years. You hope that the people who are elected will do what they say, but you have absolutely no control. They do what they want, right? The only you have really your voice or your vote is not really changing anything. And on top of that, now you are losing trust that the elections are correct, right? And that is not only in the US; it's also happening in other countries. I can tell you, I'm around in many third world countries, and I can say, but practically all the elections are somewhat dubious, right? And so the this is something where people are more and more disappointed with what they've been sold that democracy. And there are only really a handful of countries, and the most prominent is Switzerland, where you really have the possibility of a referendum, right? Where you really can say, hey, this is maybe something where really there is something like democracy that can have an influence on my daily life. But this is not many. Yeah.
But I think even if democracy was perfect, if the elections, and if we had direct democracy, we still have some ethical issues there, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Especially since, look, it's a little bit like imagine three guys on the road, right? And the smallest one is coming to the other two and say, "Hey, why did you guys steal my bike?" And the one of the bigger guys says, "We didn't steal your bike. We formed a democracy." And the other one saying, "Being the majority, we declare it law that we own your bike." And I think that is the unsolvable problem we have in the majority rule, that they can basically take over your wealth just because they are more. And it's also very questionable that people who do not pay into in the state, that don't pay any taxes, maybe because they are a public servant, or maybe because they are recipients, that they have the right to vote, because hey, they don't make a contribution, why should they vote? And if they're a majority, they can vote the money out of your pocket. And that's what we are seeing in Western countries, right? Yeah, more, at least according to some statistics, more than 50% are already receiving more from the state than they're paying in. So the system then cannot be reformed, of course, because these people are interested that they're getting more money in the future as well. So it's a minority of working people who are, so to speak, exploited by the majority, and that's not fair. And the other thing that is not ethical is, like in our example with the bicycle, that you cannot force people into a majority rule if they have not given explicit consent to that, right? It's like you and me meeting a third person, and then let's vote about this third person giving us $1,000 each, right? Because we're a majority, and the third person would say, hey, I didn't agree to that. Exactly, he didn't agree to that procedure. And that is the problem. You and I, and most of your public, your audience will probably be born in just a country, and they had to accept any rules that they were there. And now I want to replace that by a real contract, right? As saying this is the only fair thing, and that is what we are used to. Is if I want something, I have to offer something, and the other party has to agree on it. And it could agree on a majority rule, but it has to agree on it explicitly.
So tell us generally the concept of private cities, free private cities, what it is about. You are the inventor, and how does it work, and why is it a solution to this governance problem? Why is it a better solution?
The idea of a free private city is defined as such. Imagine a private company offers you the basic services of a state, which is protection of life, liberty, and property in a defined territory. You pay a fixed amount for those services per year, and your respective rights and duties are laid down in a written real citizens contract between you and the service provider, the government service provider. And for everything else, you do what you want. So instead of being subject to governments or majorities' ever-changing will, you are a contracting party on equal footing with a secured legal position against the provider. And you only become part of it if you like the offer, right? So you have real choice. You can say, hey, I looked at Tito's contract, right? What is the contract proposal in your free private city, Tito? So here, go to the website, and there's a template contract. And you say, okay, one of the things is that we guarantee you that there will be a maximum payment per year, right? And we are not going to change that. And then you say, okay, I have to pay only 1,500 euro per year. That's fine, right? But I, of course, know that I have to take care of healthcare and education and all that. And why is this the case? It is because there's only one thing that we all agree upon, and that is we want to live in peace, and we do not want to be robbed or killed when we leave the house. I would say even a criminal would agree to that. So this is something where we all have the same interest. The moment we are leaving that level, our interests are different because we have different political views, we have different situations in life, we have different culture, religious beliefs or whatever. And that is the reason why I think the best way is if the state service provider is only guaranteeing this protection of life, liberty, and property, some infrastructure and a legal dispute resolution system so that you can solve civilized your legal disputes. Everything else, let society take care of their own, so they can come up with all kinds of things, and we will of course attract people who are providing schools and hospitals, and then you can hopefully have a choice. If it's not possible, then we set up a company like this on our own and later dispose it if the city has grown. So this is very important, that the contract that has tremendous advantages. First of all, it's not a fictional social contract, it's a real one, right? And you can look into it and you have a real claim against the operator to deliver, right? For example, if you are in a free private city and your apartment is broken into, you would come to me and say, hey, wait a minute, Titus, I paid for security, so you owe me damages, right? And that is true. And of course, I would have an insurance for that, but in principle, it is true. If I say I provide you security, you pay in exchange, and then I don't provide security, you have a legal claim against me. The second thing is that, and you can sue me for that.
By the way, you don't have in the normal state right now in any country. I mean, you can go to police. Maybe they may find the burglar, the robber. May not, and even if they find him, it doesn't mean they will get your property back from that person, right? So you don't have any possibility to actually, of course you can insure yourself.
Exactly.
This incurs further costs, right?
Yeah, but that's the point. I mean, you have no counterclaim for taxes, right? People are sometimes surprised to hear that, but it's true, because that's what all legal scholars said. A tax is a payment you have to make to keep the state functioning, but you do not have a counterclaim for certain services. So that means the state says, you pay whatever I want you to pay and you have no counterclaim. Well, what incentive is this, right? I mean, look at what we have today, even in industrial countries. The core functions of the state, infrastructure, security, are not really fulfilled well. And the money is distributed to all kinds of interest groups and cases, and you cannot do anything about it. The second, so this is one thing. The second very important feature of this bilateral contract that, for example, you, Raphael, would have with the city operator would be that the third party cannot go into that relationship. It's not possible for other parties to say, let's change Raphael's contract, right? No way. This is the contract between us. And even if they're the vast majority of people, they can do their own thing, but they cannot influence your contract. So you're really protected. And you can associate with all kinds of people. You can even set up a democratic council and say, hey, let's vote on a new swimming pool. And everybody puts $1,000 in it. That's fine, but you cannot go to another guy who is not part of your council and say, hey, pay $1,000 for our swimming pool. This guy would say, no, I haven't agreed to that, right? And it's not my contract. And that is given the individual the sovereignty that he has long time lost in our current societies. And you can then decide where you spend your money. And of course, you can say, oh, no, I'd rather prefer a free private city where I pay a little bit more, but have all kinds of social security. That is also good. That's not an issue for me. I think the best model is the classical liberal minimal state, but it may be that it turns out that other people have other interests. And I think we should just let all these different products, right, develop, and then see what I think they will all be feasible. It's just people are different, right? And one people prefer more liberty, to decide for themselves how they spend their money, and other people would prefer more security. And the last but not least is this is a for-profit model. And so I have an incentive to treat my customers well, otherwise they don't come or go away, and I lose my reputation. And I can also not waste money, because then I go insolvent and also cannot start such a city any longer. So, and this is all not new. We know this from the normal market, right? And over time, if a new market is coming into existence, you have more competition. That means the prices will going down and quality will go up. And I accept the same here. And the best thing is, if you don't like it, no problems. Just stay in your state where you are. It's really for volunteers. And if this fails, it's based on informed consent. It's only on a small territory. It's not a big deal, right? If the US or the Soviet Union fails, it's a big deal for millions and millions of people.
So you are a great visionary. You wrote that book. Here I have the German version, Free Private Cities, the English version. And great idea. Now tell me, how practicable is it? Is it just a utopia, or is it something that is really feasible, doable? And what does have Tipolis to do with that?
Okay. No, this is not an, as you said, I'm an entrepreneur, so I didn't want just to develop a vision, but I wanted to make it real. And I've dedicated now the rest of my life of making this happen. Now, of course, you cannot just go somewhere and say, let's start a free private city, right? All the territory in the world is owned by states. So you have to make an agreement with states. But here's a good thing. We have already something which is comparable. It's called special economic zones. We have about several thousand special economic zones in the world, some with high degrees of autonomy, some even have own courts, like in Dubai, the DIFC.
Yeah, in Dubai right now. So there are many.
They have many special economic zones with different types or for different target groups. So it's not totally new to the countries, that to governments, that I go to them and say, hey, we want to develop the next level of special economic zones, which is technically a special administrative zone like Hong Kong or Macau are. So one country, two systems, right? They have their own institutions, own security, own courts even. And so that is what we are presenting to government, saying, hey, look, here's the deal. We are going into uninhabited territory because we do not want to force anybody to something. It's 100% voluntary system. But nothing is happening in this part of your country. So if we come establish a free private city here and you give us some internal autonomy, then investment will come, jobs for you people will be created, and eventually also the area outside of the free private city will flourish. That's how it is in Singapore and Monaco and Hong Kong. The areas around in the other country, they're also relatively wealthy. And this is the deal, right? This is not a different deal to a special economic zone. You say we're bringing investment and jobs, and in our case also high potentials people, against more freedom, against a regulatory environment which is more favorable towards freedom. And that is what we are offering. And I can say that this has been first successful in the state of Honduras. The reason was that members of the Honduran government had discovered that their country was partially corrupted by organized crime. So they had entered the institutions. That there was no reform possible with two political sides about the same size. So if you do something, the next election, the others are voted, and then they unbind everything you did, and vice versa. And so they said, hey, we should give the possibility to create something like a Hong Kong in the Caribbean, right? That was their idea. So they went to Hong Kong and looked how they did it. And then Paul Roma came in with his charter cities ideas. And then eventually I came in later because that was before I wrote a book. And then people asked me, hey, maybe can involve some of the free private city governance ideas as well. And now you have a kind of a mixture. It's a little bit more the traditional top-down government model combined with a private governance model. And the good thing is that at least the first city that was approved at the end of 2017, it's called Prospera. They have an agreement of coexistence. I mean, this contractual model is in place there. And you have two other CEDEs. CEDE stands for Zone for Economic Development and Employment. And they have all large autonomy, right? So they can, like this Hong Kong model, right? They can come up with their completely own regulatory system with the exception of Honduran criminal law and the parts of the constitutions that are applicable and the international agreements that Honduras has conducted. But other than that, they're relatively free to design their own legal environment. And we have 3 CEDEs permitted now. Each is a little bit different. So you can already see different target groups, competition as a discovery process. And I learned this weekend, 22 new applications are in the pipeline. So that seems to really create there is something happening there in Honduras. Right, that's for sure. My company Tipolis is in
new applications for new
CEDEs. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So it's it will be soon similar to Germany in Middle Ages when we had like thousands of free cities.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, this is not a completely free private city model. Again, this is more you're part of the Honduran state as a local government, but with significant autonomy. And in so far, you can try out new things, which is okay, right? Would say it's 70-80% like a free private city. And that is already a lot, and it's completely voluntary to join. And you have, we have currently, my company Tipolis we have helped the first CEDE Prospera to be developed, structured, and it is we are holding now smaller shares still because there have been several investment rounds in the meantime. But this is also profitable, right? We invested at a valuation of 7 million and the current round is at 100 million and it's only 4 years. So, and in between was 35 million round. So you can see that you can really make money with that kind and you do a good thing. And of course, there's a lot of political opposition from the left saying, hey, you're taking away our sovereignty and the usual things, right? But I know that there's one CEDE who is explicitly only for poor Honduran workers. It's an industrial CEDE. And you probably don't want to live there, but for the Hondurans, it's already very, very attractive because they have security, which is a problem in Honduras. They have better healthcare, better education. They're treated fairly. They have a chance to go to court for $10 fee or whatever. So they are already voting with their feet, right? Despite all these political opponents, right? I mean, I said, let the market decide. Yeah, and I don't want to argue. Let's build. And then we see what's happening. And not all say this will be a success, that's clear. But some will be, and then the others can learn from that. And other countries around Honduras will maybe then copy the procedure. You know, El Salvador, they already have Bitcoin as a legal tender. They might be interested in other innovative models as well. And then my company Tipolis is in negotiations, in advanced negotiations with an African state. And we have already signed an MOU with the government, and we hope that we can create something similar to Honduras, more a real free private city type of development in that country soon. And then from there, maybe it's then easier. The first project are most difficult. And negotiating with governments is at least 2 or 3 years, right? Negotiations.
Tipolis, for our audience to understand, is the holding company that takes shares and develops these different city projects around the world. So generally, you in Tipolis, you build Hong Kong's and Macau's and Dubai's and Monaco's around the world, right?
Yeah, ideally. I mean, but we're starting from scratch, so it takes a while. But indeed, yeah, we want to create not only one free private city, or if it's a prosperity zone or autonomous zone or a charter city, all kinds of hybrids is okay as well, as long as the people are sovereign individuals protected by a contract. This is important for us, that they are somehow protected, have direct rights against the service provider or the government of that area. And yes, we are basically doing the same that I told you before with the mining. We have an active holding, which is incubating some projects. investing in some project and consulting some projects against equity fee, because we are not a consultancy, right? We're saying we can help you because we have a lot of experience already in that sector now. I mean, probably most you can have. It's a totally new market. And yes, we can help you with your project, but you have to give us a certain percentage. And now we have a portfolio of projects, and I think the most advanced are in Honduras. Why? Because Honduras has made the legal framework. They have even changed the constitution to make it possible. They have set up a special law called the SEDE law, and in other countries it's a little bit behind. But I'm feeling confidence that this is shaping the 21st century. It is because, I mean, if you can choose in the supermarket what you want to buy, if you can choose where you want to travel in holiday, why shouldn't you be allowed to choose what governance model you prefer, which gives you more or less freedom? I prefer more freedom. There's nothing to offer, so I have to create it on my own.
Right. This is a very entrepreneurial approach. So tell me about because you're going in that direction, about your long-term vision. How would with your ideas look the world in let's say 50 years, in 100 years, like the ideal state of the world? How would like the market of living together, how would it look like?
Yeah, the market of living together in 50 or 100 years would be so that you have many more choices to make than today. Instead of 200 entities, you have maybe 5,000. And you have probably some types of products, right? You make your choice. If you are born into one free private city or whatever it is, you say, hey, I'm here, I'm a child, I learn about our system, but you then learn, okay, what else is available? And you might say, okay, I want something in my language. I want something that offers me maximum development capacity for my businesses, and I want to be left alone. So then you have a variety of offers on the table, and they are all advertising. They're competing for you, right? They say, hey, come to us, we offer you this and that. And I think there's not one product that fits all, right? If you're a young person, you go into a zone where other young people, girls are, right? They try to become, have social life. And then if you have finalized your education, you say, hey, now I want to make some money and save money for my retirement. And then you go into a kind of Dubai scenario, a very active, dynamic environment where a lot of business is going on, where it's exciting. Then if you're old, you might get, hey, I want to go in a city where like-minded people, same culture, same religion, same language, are living a peaceful way, right? So, but I'm left alone by the state and do not have to, I'm not told how to speak, whom to hire, and all that. So I think we will have more choices. I think it will be a much more peaceful world, because the states know they cannot basically go away with, hey, let's just send troops to Afghanistan, because people would say, it's not my contract and I'm not going to pay for it, right? So you can send troops to Afghanistan, of course, Raphael, if you align yourself with others and say, let's pay for the expeditionary forces. Let's make a collection, right? That's fine. We have nothing against it, but you cannot force your fellow citizens to spend money for cases they don't have elected, right? And that's exactly the big difference, and which will automatically make this a better, freer, more peaceful place. A lot of brain power, which is not now going into the power play, political power play. How can I manipulate people? How can I tell people something they don't want that they nevertheless wanted? Or how can I divide society so that I can better rule? And by saying, hey, these are bad people and you should be against them, right? this is all disappearing, not completely, but to a large degree. And even the nation states of today, they will be forced to adapt to that system, because otherwise the best people, the high performers, will leave to the free private cities where they are left alone and have guaranteed rights and securities.
So in your model of a country, there is no such thing as as politics, right? Because there is no elections, no way to, so to say, yeah, to get the majority rule, because everybody is so to say, they have their own contractual agreement with the state operator or with the city operator. Of course, they can gather together, they can create societies,
Yes.
like private societies,
Mm-hmm.
where they can also group together and maybe convince each other, but everything is voluntarily, right?
Yeah, there will be some politics with regard to the other entities and states, right? For example, if there is
right,
one is basically developing into an aggressive religious fundamentalist or social justice warriors. Let's conquer the world and makes justice happen finally, right? Then you have to ally with other cities around and say, hey, let's form an ad hoc ally. Let's finance private military providers to defend ourselves against this aggressive city. But then after the war, you go back to normal, right? So this is the rest of politics, which is foreign policy, if you want. But as you're right, I mean, there will be politics in the private societies that you have, right? I mean, we are all human. I'm not intending to change human beings. I just say, hey, this is a better framework for you flourishing than what we have today. And it's your choice. You can also remain in the system as it is today if you are happy with that. I'm not, but you might be.
What do you reply to people who say, I like it in Europe, like unified Europe, we have one currency, we don't have borders, at least we didn't have before COVID, right? What do you say to that? Because if you have like 5,000 countries, it's troublesome maybe to travel around between them and so on.
Yeah, but first of all, there will be not 5,000 isolated entities. It's already now we are in contact. We just had a conference in Switzerland about liberty in our lifetime, where all these projects were presenting, and we are already in contact. We're already basically exchanging information and experience. So that means there will be kind of Hanseatic League of like-minded cities, and they will maybe say, hey, if you are in one of our cities admitted, you can go to any other, right? Because we know the procedure is about the same. And that is going to happen. And I can also say only tell the people who think the bigger and more powerful European Union is, the better their lives are. History proves you exactly the opposite. The more powerful empires are, the less powerful people are. And you have the highest income in small states like Singapore, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Iceland. These are few states that have no debt, very low crime rates, and the people have the highest per capita income. And they are all small. So that is not true that you have a better life in a big state. I can tell you, if the European Union is getting more powerful, you will be controlled what you spend your digital money on. You will be controlled what you eat, what you travel because of climate, and you will be controlled what you say, because you're not allowed to criticize government. And that is going to happen. You can already see the pictures on the paintings on the wall, right? You can already see it coming. With even YouTube is censoring now everybody who is saying something which is not in line with the World Health Organization saying to COVID, right? And they then had to switch because suddenly, so just.
If you criticize like the elections in Germany, you will be also censored, right?
Yeah.
And we know that there were, some things happening in Berlin, for example, during the election.
Yeah, and that is not even disputed, right? But you were not allowed to talk about that in advance, and this is showing you where the journey is going to what direction. It's a censored world. It's a world where a group of people think they know it better than you, and you are not allowed to go against them. And I'm relatively sure that the inconvenience with this type of government that we are having now in many European countries will grow. And so people will look for alternatives. And then I say, hey, if you don't like private companies running the show, you can form a cooperative with your fellow citizens. But important that you give people a contract that are secured. So this is not a problem, right? It's not about being private, but if you are a private company for profit, you have just better incentives. That is, I just want to tell, this is my third lesson. For profit is not a bad thing, because for profit forces you to not to waste resources and treat your customer well. And now compare this to politics.
Right, right. Absolutely right. Okay, so Tipolis is a company, it's a for-profit company. Is it investable? I mean, can I, for example, have a share in, I don't know, maybe you will build 20 cities, 20 Hong Kongs, Singapores. Can I, is it possible to, have a stake in each of these cities?
Yeah, I think each of these, I mean, Singapore, Hong Kong is big goals. So at the moment, we're happy if we can create a Monaco or something with 35,000 people.
Yeah.
But the point is, yes, Tipolis I mean, you will definitely be capable of investing in all of these cities, because there will be all opened the projects to investors, because so much money is needed.
Right, as an
exactly
company in land, in maybe some projects developed.
Yeah. So I can tell you at the moment what the normal model is. You have an operating company that has the land, that has service companies, and had administrative functions. And each are separated companies. You might have an extra electricity company, for example, which is then later maybe sold to an electricity industry who is better suited. But this is in the beginning. And then you can invest in the operating company and can make, like a special economic zone makes 70% out of their money from land transactions, and 10 to 20% from service fees for all kinds of things, and 10 for everything else.
But what do you mean by land transactions? Do you mean selling the land they have bought primarily, or like getting a cut from the transactions, private transactions between the residents, or both?
Both. But frankly, the main money will be made from land transactions, because if you buy the land as an operating company in a third world country, right, and then you put a first world framework with a free private city over it, and it's successful, then the increase in value is tremendously. And then what you can do is you sell parts of the land, you rent parts of the land, and you lease parts of the land. We are experimenting with all kinds of things. And this is the main income source. Right?
When I explain the idea to people, I bring the example of Dubai, where you have this master developers who generally are state-owned, or like with major share of the stake of the state, and they generally get desert for free. They do development on that, like basic infrastructure and development plan, and sell it for like 40 million a hectare, more or less. So so this is like tremendous value increase that you
exactly get. This is the main with a business model, right? So for example, with the pure government service fees is not the biggest business. When it's more than 10,000 people, you can make significant money with that. But before, it's rather subsidizing things. But this is okay. I mean, this is kind of venture capital if you want. You have to invest in the beginning, and that's why you bring investors in. And then later, after you have reached a certain number of inhabitants, then you start making real money, even out of this government service fees. But I told you before, we don't want to go public with the holding, and we don't want to have too many shareholders. So what's currently happening, we have now, before we had just out of my network people who were supporting us, but now we are, for the first and probably last time, opening the holding Tipolis for investors. We are raising just 10 million because we need some money to incubate some projects. And then after that, these projects will be financed on their own. But this is now 2 months, I would say it's open, but it's only for qualified investors. So you have to invest minimum 100,000 euro, and not more than 2 million, because we want to have a variety of multipliers. So this is what we are currently at, and I hope that this is the first and last at the same time, because it's really time consuming making these capital raises and all that, and I don't want to have too many shareholders, because that again means too many friction. But in the so if somebody's interested to be part in the whole story, so to speak, right, that Tipolis investment would make sense. If you are more down to earth, you say, hey, no, I wait until an interesting project is popping up, and then I'm investing in that project company.
Right. But coming back to Tipolis, if somebody wants to invest, there will be a contact information or instructions for contact below this video. So guys, write me up, and just tell me about yourself. And the minimum investment is 100,000. If you are a serious investor, serious guy, you will be invited to that round. If you are interested, we will do it probably in November, sometime in November. You will be informed via email. So that's the thing. Titus, last thing. What is the question I should have asked about the project and I didn't? Maybe we missed something that may be important, that may interest people.
Yeah, maybe how long does this all take, right? So this is not an easy business, and we are not talking about a real estate development. I mean, you can start a real estate development everywhere, and we are not talking about special economic zones or free trade zones. What we are talking about is real autonomous zones, and that means normally 2 or 3 years negotiation with the government. But after that, you can start right like as it was in a real estate project. But you have at the same time set up security forces, court systems, and all that. So if you have done it once, it's much easier to do it twice, and maybe even as a franchise model, multiply it. And we are now at the situation where the very first project have already started. So it's a little bit easier now for the next. So I think it's a good time to become part of the story now.
So Tipolis right now has stakes in 2 or 3 cities in Honduras, and is developing this one in Africa, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I can tell you, a lot of people are very disappointed what's happening in the world today. And so I get on a weekly basis, I get offers for some projects somewhere, but most of them lack the legal autonomy. But there will be new projects coming. We have also a lower version, which is called intentional community, where you rather try to get municipal autonomy without changing the whole federal law system, which is then quicker. And that might be a new development which is happening in the world, and we will probably also be a part of it in some areas. So there's a variety of new things coming up to the world.
Okay, Titus. Thanks so much. One and only Titus Gebel, one of the greatest visionaries, in my opinion, in our world today, and a guy you should keep an eye on because he has the potential to change the world, and he's not just a dreamer. He is a doer, and he has proven that in his life, in his business. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you, Titus, for your ideas, because I think this is really like ethically one of the best things that can, one of the most ethical ideas I have heard about. And so if you could move the world in that direction, it is really worthwhile. And I myself, I'm also excited about your company, about your business, and encourage others to look at what you're doing. Thanks so much for being with us, and yeah, all the best for you, Titus.
My pleasure, Rafael. Thank you for your friendly words and your support.